balance of the Force has been shaken. Clone Wars have begun.
Leader, you've got bugs on your tail! Take it down!
Alright, troops, make it count!
You've got a clear shot! Take evasive action! Team up there, coming around! Let's try out! My port engine now! My port engine now!
The 1.0 version of Fall of the Republic is now available, and we are going to be going over the release notes for this change. There are a lot of things that have been added, updated, and changed, so this won't necessarily be exhaustive, but it should give you a good idea of what has changed in all the categories. Several of the mechanical changes that we're going to be mentioning have had their own full previews, so I'll link to those in the description where they apply. So first off, we're going to talk about the visual updates. There have been new models made for the Invincible class Dreadnought, all of the Acclamator variants, the Dreadnought Heavy Cruiser, the Architens, the Carrack, the IPV Patrol Craft, and Delta Squad, which includes the new Clone Commando unit, but there are individual skins obviously for Boss, Fixer, Scorch, and Sev. The old versions were from like 2007, so they look a lot better now. We've also got distinct models for the Providence Dreadnought and the Providence Carrier/Destroyer. Before, those two were using the same old model, and now they use much better individual models. There are new paint schemes on the Venator for heroes. We have Tarkin, Yularen, Drawn, and Wessex, who all have the command Venator symbols, but there are also markings for the Open Circle Armada on Yularen's Star Destroyer, as well as Barton Coburn, I believe. There are also unique skins for Trench's Providence Dreadnought, as well as two unique Providence skins for the Lucid Voice and Colicoid Swarm, which are not quite heroes, but unique name Providences in some of the Galactic Conquests. There are also new sub-faction skin variants for the B1 and B2 battle droids. There are a few units that have death clones now for space. We are going to be continuing to update these as we go. Generally, the reason that death clones aren't used very widely in the mod is because there are still a lot of models being updated, so most ships just explode and that's it. But we are going to slowly be working our way through those. Some of them are kind of preliminary right now, and hopefully over time we'll be able to turn everything into having a full death clone. There were a bunch of other particle updates for things like explosions, bombing runs, and orbital bombardments. There are some explosions that still use the old particles, but we are also working our way through those for future versions. And there are some updates to some of the projectiles, including the ATTE, along with some updates to the visuals for planets and space maps, most notably the volcanic planet texture as well as Coruscant. We're still playing with how we want to have these all set up in the final instances, but the volcanic planet and Coruscant in particular should look much better now. One of the big focuses for this release for both Fall of the Republic and Thrawn's Revenge has been in expanding the mechanics on the galactic level. The biggest part of this is the introduction of 3 new resources. There's ship crews, which you gain and spend just like credits to make ships, but there's also food and industrial parts. These are a resource that you produce per week and only directly impact your influence. Influence is going to play a larger part now. They've always played a role in, for example, the government mechanics of the Republic, as well as some role in your income. But now, if you have your influence low enough, there's going to be a chance for that planet to gain unrest, which is indicated beside the influence bar with 3 little red fists if you have 3 unrest stacks. And if the planet has enough unrest for a week, the planet will flip and join another faction. There was a full breakdown of these resource and revolt mechanics in separate videos, which I am going to link in the description. There have also been 3 new Galactic Conquest scenarios added. In the previous releases, we only had the full progressives from the ground up, the single planet start mode, and the Foros campaign, but now there are 3 new Galactic Conquests based on the Outer Rim Sieges, the Hunt for the Malevolence, and Operation Dirge's Lance. Dirge himself isn't quite in yet, but he will be coming hopefully in the next version. There have also been some changes to how blockades work. So typically in previous releases, in a lot of Empire at War mods in the base game, one of the most effective strategies was to clear off a planet in space, leave a unit over it, and then move on to the next ones. There are a few things that help prevent this from being as effective, though you can still do it in the shorter term. One of the major changes here is that if there is a ground-to-space weapon, so the ion cannon or the hypervelocity gun on a planet, then every week it will shoot down a unit over the planet, so you cannot leave a force there without suffering some losses if you're intending to stay there for a long time. Blockades also have a chance for an influence drop every week, and because this can eventually lead to unrest stacks and revolts, there is a large chance of a planet flipping on the galactic map by overuse of revolts. We've expanded the from the ground up game mode to have an Era 1 start, which is pre-Clone Wars, so you're using only units from before the Clone Wars, and we've also swapped the Republic starting position from Karita down to Kamino, which should make it a little bit easier with the new galactic mechanics that are in place. There's also been some additions in research, so if you are playing as the Republic, you'll be able to upgrade your PDF dreadnoughts into the dreadnought carrier. As the CIS, you'll be able to upgrade your auxiliary Lucrehulks into the battle carrier Lucrehulks, and there's also research to add fighters to external racks for certain ships on both factions. A smaller, more quality of life change is that we have put in a lot of work, specifically Rhino, to make sure that we have all the map previews extracted for the galactic level, so when you zoom into planets, you should always be able to set up your base and see which map it is. If there are any missing, then you can directly report those as bugs and we'll get them fixed as soon as we can. It's a weird thing because it does require a lot of upkeep, so there's a possibility of 1 or 2 being missing, but we're going to try our best to stay on top of that from here on out. Next, we're going to talk about the new units as well as new heroes for the factions. There haven't been quite as many new units because this was largely focused more on the galactic level mechanics. However, for the Republic, we have added in the Mandator 1 and 2 since we now have made designs for those. Farshot has done a great job taking the information we have on those and making new designs that matches that. There's also the Dreadnought Carrier, which we mentioned before, the Galleon, which is a fleet tender, and the Cloak-shaped Fighter, which is present in a few places. 3 new types of Republic infantry have been added, being the Clone Commandos that we mentioned earlier, Jedi Knights, which you can now train regular versions of, and the ST-6 droid, which is a type of walker. We'd like to thank Phoenix Rising for allowing us to use the model for that. For the Aero 1 from the ground up scenario, there's also the A4 Juggernaut. And moving on to the CIS, there's fewer units here, but they have had the Munifex added, the Lucrehulk droid control ship, and an auxiliary version of that. For the CIS, we've added the Lucid Voice and Colicoid Swarm, kind of minor heroes, as I talked about before. We've added Yako Stark and a Recusant, Dom Tritor and a Captor, Wat Tambor, another economic hero, who you get as the CIS upon full integration of the Techno Union, Callie Trim, who's in a Bulwark 1 in the Outer Rim Siege GC, Sean Volta in a Recusant, and Kalani, who is present everywhere as a ground hero. The Republic side gets a little bit more complicated. There are a few mechanics now for getting different heroes, because there are a lot of Venator heroes, for example. So rather than just having the options we had before that are there automatically, there is an option that you can buy that will give you a Venator hero. If you build it on certain planets, it'll give you a specific one. It says so in the tooltip, which you'd have to build where, and if you build it anywhere else, you get a random selection of the Venator heroes. So this allows us to have still a limit on how many heroes are going to be present for the Republic versus the CIS at any point, while still allowing us to represent just how many characters are there, especially when it comes to showing some of the characters that are maybe a bit more obscure during the Clone Wars or more prominent later, without overflowing the bar. There has been a bit more fleshing out of the Order 65 and Order 66 branches, so there are some heroes that are specifically available to the Republic depending on which branch they take. And some of these heroes, like with the CIS, are only available in certain galactic conquests, but probably most excitingly for people, we have Captain Rex and Commander Cody, as well as the Null Arc, so Fordo specifically, as well as his LAAT with the whole shark face on it. But for the other general heroes, we have General Jantis, Hurst Ramodi, Kendall Ozzel in Alat. We have Omega Squad in certain situations, Coy in Dirge's Lance, Admiral Grant in a Venator in Dirge's Lance, Moff Tracta in a Venator in the Foros GC. For the random Venators, we have Admiral Dow, Admiral Drawn, Captain Denimore, Den Wessex, Segoro Autumn, and those are going to be in addition to some heroes that were previously in the mod as just general spawns. There are also some heroes that are being used to differentiate between the Order 65 and 66 branch, including some things that are upgrades that are available for characters that are available in other ways. So for example, Tarkin and Outer Talon are both available throughout the early parts of the game, but after you choose Order 65 or 66, if you go to Order 65, you can upgrade Talon from an Acclimator 1 to a Praetor, or you can upgrade Tarkin through Order 66 to an ISD from his Venator. There's also a few other characters like changes to Anakin to make him Darth Vader. We have Admiral Moline, and on Mon Mothma's side you get Bail Organa and Ramus Antilles in Tantive 4, and the upgrade that I mentioned for Adder Talon. There's going to be more fleshing out some of this as we go on. We're still trying to keep it to the core of the Jedi being the focus of Order 65, and kind of Vader being the focus of Order 66 and some of those Imperial characters. We're not looking to make wholly divergent rosters. It's still supposed to be the idea that this is the Republic versus the Empire, kind of what you're choosing there. There have been a few updates to other heroes, though. Trench will now respawn in his kind of mechanized form after his initial death, and then Grievous has an additional option for his ships before you'd go from the Renator to Invisible Hand to the Malevolence. Now you start him off in a Munificent, and you can flip him to either the Renator, which is his Recusant, or the Invisible Hand, and then either of those can go to Malevolence. So it's still 3 tiers, it's just the old tier 1 has been moved to another second tier ship. And you can also flip him between Recusant or between the Renator and the Invisible Hand whenever you want. On the Galactic level, we have also changed the CIS sub-faction colors to work a little bit better. There's also been some changes to the timing of events. So Order 66, you used to have to wait 30 weeks for it to happen after you've chosen the event, which was a fair amount more time than some games even took. So now it happens 5 weeks after you choose the event. And there might be some more compression of certain times on events as people get more familiar with the game and as we have a better idea of how the game sort of paces out. This is going to be especially true as we add more events in the future, because having more story events really is going to be one of our focuses going forward. But as we get into ground combat, there have been several significant changes that should change how you're playing in ground combat a fair bit, and to make certain of the rougher edges a bit more smoothed out and make it all a lot more fun. At the core of this, we have changed how garrisons work, so they are limited rather than being unlimited like before. However, this has also come with a certain nerf to bombing runs and orbital bombardments. If you build AA turrets, bombing runs are going to be less of a threat as long as they're properly positioned. So if you play it correctly, you will be able to stop bombing runs, and the AI will be able to stop bombing runs. But there's also a greater use of base shields and planetary shields. So planetary shields will prevent you from using orbital bombardments and bombing runs anywhere. And this is also going to be true of hypervelocity guns and ion cannons, where you can't use space-to-ground weapons because those weapons are kind of keeping them at bay. So overall, you should have a much tighter and more polished experience with ground battles. There is still going to be a lot more that we do with them, but there are some other changes like the unit changes we've spoken about, but infantry squads have been rebalanced a fair bit. Commandos are still being rebalanced a fair bit. There's now indications within infantry squads of what they're armed with, so you can see at a glance the difference between what your infantry squads are. Rocket troops will have rocket indicators under them. This is something that many other mods have done, so it's not an original idea here. It's just something that works elsewhere and something that we thought would work here as well. Most notably, probably the Clone Wars 4.0 mod and Awakening of the Rebellion have done this. We've also made it so that ground structures will always be visible on the minimap, so you don't need to hunt stuff down as much. Largely, we're trying to make the combat more fun, but also make some of the less fun elements of ground battles, like the usual hunt for stuff, be less of a factor. There have been some general graph balance changes for ground and space as well, but on space, the biggest change to talk about is that we have changed it so that your primary structures in space are no longer going to be your ship production yards. Instead, shipyards are a single structure you build at every planet at the max tier already, and your primary starbase is going to be an actual defense station. So you're going to upgrade from XQ to Golan 1, Golan 2, Golan 3, and then your final stage is currently the Valaduja and the Empress. We are working on some other more Clone Wars specific content for that, specifically the Valor Station, the Intergalactic Banking Clan gun platform. Actually, between the time that I record this and we actually release the mod, it's possible that these might change and those will be in, but over the next few releases, this will be something that you notice changing a bit more. But once you have built, for example, the Golan 2 as your primary defense station, that'll open up the possibility to build a Golan 1. Once you've upgraded to a Golan 3, you'll be able to build another Golan 2, and so on. So you'll essentially be able to get to a point where on your most important worlds, you'll have the opportunity to build one of every defense station, and this will help us stop some bugs that were overflowing the number of stations people used to have, as well as making it a bit more clear what you're attacking, and it also helps the AI know what they're attacking. tracking. So all of this should help really polish some of the ground and space experiences that people are having. The other major change for space battles is that the pop cap has been reduced from 300 to 200. This should help rescale some of the battles where people would be most likely to experience lag, which is still a lot of units on the map at once, and still kind of keeping the Clone Wars mass battle feel, but without some of the side effects for performance, and allowing a bit more control over what's happening in the battle. On the lag side, we've also removed the shadow meshes from a few more fighters. This was another kind of large contributor to lag. Most people's graphics card wouldn't have cared about it as much, but it does help a little bit. So that's going to do it for 1.0. There will again be links for some of the overviews of certain features in the description, and I'm going to be working on some guide videos for the factions to help new players especially know what's going on when they're playing either the CIS or the Republic. One of those may be up by the time this goes up as well. But hope you guys are looking forward to playing 1.0. Hope you're enjoying it if you're playing it already, and we will have more information on the future of Fall of the Republic soon, because there's a lot of cool stuff coming.